I donated my kidney to save his life, but his dark secret changed everything. I never should have opened that door the moment I did. I felt a chill creep through me, a cold wave that left my skin prickling. It was surreal, standing in front of something that could change everything, yet I was drawn in like something out of a dream or maybe a nightmare. My life was simple: wake up, work at the clinic, help people. But just days after donating my kidney to save his life, everything spiraled. I thought I did a good thing, you know. I believed I was a hero. I was met with whispers behind my back, words I couldn't quite catch but felt heavy in the air like a gathering storm. It wasn't just gratitude I received, it was something darker, unsettling. The clinic smelled like antiseptic, the kind of sterile scent that made my stomach churn. The lights flickered overhead, casting a dim glow that felt more like an omen than an embrace. Shadows danced in the corners of the room, and with them came the sounds, faint but persistent, like beings too close for comfort. Then the strange noises began. Taps on the floor, soft and rhythmic, just out of my line of sight. In the quiet corners of my mind, fear began to settle. My heart raced, every sound seemed amplified, echoing against the cold walls. I could swear I saw objects shifting, a chart moving, a pen rolling off the desk, both too uncanny to ignore. I didn't just feel watched. I felt hunted. Every glance over my shoulder summoned a rush of dread, tightening my chest. The air grew thick, stretching out time and making it impossible to breathe. Had I done something wrong by saving him? As I gathered the courage to confront the whispers, the silence screamed louder. When I reached for the doorknob, it felt cold and wrong in my hand, like I was about to touch something that would change me forever. And then, the door swung open, creaking like an old haunted house. A shadow flickered past me, something dark and elongated, slipping into the hallway, an indistinct figure that seemed to beckon. My breath caught in my throat. What had I gotten myself into? Was he truly alive, or had I opened a door to something far more sinister? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The flickering lights above seemed to stutter in acknowledgement of the shadow that had darted by, and I hesitated, teetering on the threshold between curiosity and a primal urge to flee. That deep instinct urged me to turn back, to shut the door and lock out whatever had begun to seep into my reality. But curiosity had always been my weakness, and I took a step into the hallway, my heart pounding with each echo of my footfalls. The corridor twisted like a labyrinth, the sterile walls closing in around me as the temperature plummeted. A draft swept past, chilling me to the bone, and I could have sworn I heard whispers mingle with the rustling of my scrubs. They wrapped around me, a cacophony of phantoms, their tones weaving tales of despair, betrayal, and fear that thrummed with every heartbeat that I pressed on, compelled by an inexplicable need to uncover the truth. Was he truly alive? Would my sacrifice become a potential undoing? As I rounded a corner, the air thickened, becoming suffocating as it dripped with an unnameable dread, like a storm cloud pregnant with rain. The very atmosphere buzzed with an energy that made my skin crawl, and an icy finger seemed to trace along my spine. That I reached the end of the hall where the stark light shone through a small window, illuminating an old storage room long since abandoned. Through the glass, I noticed movement, the shadow again, lingering just out of view. The door creaked ominously as I pushed it open, revealing a room littered with medical supplies and forgotten memories. Dust motes danced like lost souls in the dim light, and the air stank of decay mixed with something metallic. That's when I saw Ida body on the floor. A reminder of something lost or something yet to be found. My breath caught as I approached it, no longer caring if I was being watched. The figure lay twisted grotesquely, limbs in unnatural positions, face obscured by a tattered cloth. I felt a magnetic pull toward it, an urgency I could neither explain nor resist. Then, as if in response to my proximity, the figure stirred. A quivering sigh escaped its lips. Was it alive? My heart raced, but I couldn't move. Fear rooted me in place, and I was locked in a silent battle between stepping closer and fleeing. Behind me, the door slammed shut with a resonating crash, throwing me into darkness. My pulse thundered in my ears as shadows filled the room, swarming around me like a living entity. I stumbled back toward the door's unyielding surface, pounding against it, desperate to escape, but the darkness seemed to congeal around me, a suffocating wall of despair trapping me in. Then I heard Ida's voice, soft and chilling, whispered from the embrace of shadow. "You should have left well enough alone." The words slipped through the air, liquid ice slithering beneath my skin. A sharp pain lanced through my side, and I froze, feeling warmth pooling around my waist. I glanced down to see blood, not mine, but from another source, pooling against the floor in morbid beauty. It seeped toward me, and as I stared, I recognized Ida's connection to what I had given away. The room became a distortion of reality, throwing flashes of memory into chaos. His face, contorted and twisted, eyes wide with hollow despair, the shadow coalesced, forming into a figure so closely resembling him, yet so utterly different. Its eyes burned with an ember glow, a reflection of something unholy. "Now you can join me forever," it rasped, drawing closer as the warmth from my side faded into an unbearable cold, pulling me toward that abyss I had unwittingly opened. Just as the darkness threatened to ensnare me, a sharp sound shattered the stillness, a single, blood-curdling scream that reverberated through the hall. It was the scream of someone who had made a choice that sought to draw me into its depths. And with that, the door sprang open. The door swung open, revealing an unyielding strip of light that split the shadows asunder, leaving a harrowing silhouette in its wake. I stumbled backward, still anchored by that horrid, familiar shadow, the apparition that wore my loved one's features yet twisted them into something sinister. From the doorway, the source of the scream appeared, a young nurse I recognized from my days of service. Her eyes were wide, frenzied, strands of hair plastered to her forehead with sweat. "Get away!" she shouted, but her voice was swallowed by the dimness gathering like a curtain around me. It felt as though everything in that decaying room held its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. "Please!" I cried, too terrified to look back at what had once been him. "Help me!" But there was no time for her to answer. The figure lunged, its movements swift and unnatural, a flash of inhumanity that blurred the space between us. The nurse dove for the door, grabbing my arm and yanking me toward the light, her grip grounding amidst the horror encroaching. I felt its ambient chill clenching at my ankles and creeping up until it threatened to seize my heart in its cold grasp. "This way," she urged, tugging me through the doorway just as the shadow reached for my throat. We barreled into the hallway, breathless and wide-eyed. As we ran, I could hear the soft hiss of that grievous voice trailing behind us, echoing like a heartbeat returning from the void. "You cannot escape what is owed." I turned to see if it was following, but all I glimpsed was darkness pooling in the corners, yearning for a chance to strike. "What was that?" I gasped, crashing into the wall as we sprinted past rooms of indifferent silence, each one hiding untold horrors like ghosts locked away in sepulchres. "Fear the ones you tried to save," she whispered urgently. "They're not who they used to be. One of them are." Tears streamed down her face, streaking a path of fleeting sanity against the numbing dread that engulfed the hospital halls. "What do you mean?" I choked on the words, confusion bleeding into panic. All at once, the fluorescent lights overhead flickered violently, and I caught glimpses of multiple figures along the corridor, shadows moving in sync with the flickering light, their shapes distorting and multiplying, as though more evils were rising from the depths alongside what I had unleashed. "Those have passed through here," the nurse gasped, breathless. "Their souls, I don't know how or why, but they're trapped between worlds, and they feed off their desires, off our fears." An eerie silence enveloped us momentarily, itself saturated with the whispered regrets of lost lives. I thought of him. My sacrifice. The dark secret that had clawed its way through to the surface. An unsettling sensation settled in my stomach, a dread realization that perhaps my act of salvation had opened this chasm of torment. In a frenzied sprint, we turned a corner toward the stairwell, the nurse leading me through an emergency exit, when I heard it again, a low unholy laughter echoing throughout the hall, reverberating in my bones. Something cold brushed against my back, an unseen presence, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Just as we reached the staircase, desperate to escape to fresh air and away from the cursed corridors, a deafening crash sounded behind us. The walls trembled as if the building itself was growing hungry, yearning for the souls it had devoured. I dared a glance behind, and what I saw made my heart freeze. The twisted figure stood there, no longer obscured by shadow. It had taken form, a grotesque caricature of his once kind demeanor, flesh rotting, eyes burning with malevolence. Disfigured hands reached forward, grasping, and I could see mouths opening in silent screams behind it, trapped souls struggling in vain against their damp prison. "There's no escape," it croaked, the words laced with a horrifying intimacy I had once known. I felt the nurse tug me again, and we ascended the steps two at a time. It swarmed closer, enveloping the stairwell in an abyss of despair even the vibrant light couldn't penetrate. As we neared the exit, the last bastion of hope, I heard that horrific voice one last time, twisted with menace, "Come back to me," it cried, and I knew then that the cost of my choice could never be truly measured. Just as we burst into the open air, the chill of night wrapped around us like a shroud, a final echo clawed at my consciousness, louder than before. "You owe me." A bone-chilling truth thudded heavy against my heart, and the ground beneath us trembled as the hospital seemed to pulse with life, resenting our escape. But as I turned to face the freedom I thought I had gained, a figure materialized before us. The darkness folded, revealing another visage, this one hauntingly familiar. An echo of him, pale and transparent, hovering, caught between realms. "Help me," it whispered, stretching out its hand toward me, the tether to the sinister secret that began everything. And then darkness engulfed us once more. A searing pain shot through my chest, as if the darkness itself was clawing at my soul, and I stumbled backward, unable to peel my gaze from the apparition. My heart roared in protest against the sight of him, this hollow semblance of life that hovered before us, eyes wide and glistening with unshed tears of an unreconciled longing. "Help me," it whispered again, a mere breath of sound, gravelly and tinged with desperation. The moment hung heavy in the air, as if time itself had paused to witness the reunion of love turned to horror. The nurse gripped my arm tighter, a lifeline tethering me to reality and away from the abyss that threatened to spiral open beneath my feet. "Don't!" she screamed, her voice slicing through the moment like a knife. The weight of her urgency resurrected my senses, yet part of me ached to reach out to that familiar face, to grasp his hand, me sacrifice breathing again. "Stop! This isn't him!" she cried as I hesitated, my heart divided between yearning and fear. Shadows danced around his figure, twisting in a ballet of anguish as his form warped and flickered like a flame in the wind. But I could not help it. A part of me yearned for the warmth of an affection that I thought had been extinguished. I choked, advancing a step closer, but the nurse pulled me back with violent resolve. "No. It's the darkness. It wants to take you back." Her voice carved through my uncertainty, but the echoes of his plea wrapped around me like chains. "Don't you see? He's trapped," I cried, fighting against her grip. "I can save him." With a wounded sort of strength, she shook her head. "Not like this. These are not the people you knew. They've become something else, something that feeds on love and despair." An anguished groan erupted from the figure, a chilling echo that twisted the very air, making it seem as if the night itself mourned for him. I looked into his eyes, those eyes that had once held so much life, and saw only a reflection of my worst nightmares, swirling with the darkness I had unwittingly invoked. "Please help me," he whispered once more, the urgency morphing into a gurgling cough that made my stomach turn. It was an appeal tainted by something insidious, the atmosphere thickening around me with a palpable dread. Suddenly, the air shifted. The figure, once so desperate, became laden with hostility. Shadows coiled around him, taking on grotesque forms of twisted faces that willed themselves into existence. The ground beneath us shuddered in resonance, echoing the anger of souls that had been forsaken. Don't you understand? The nurse cried, her voice rising over the cacophony of anguish around us. You can't save him. You mustn't give in. In that moment, the haunted visage became an amalgamation of anguished cries, mouths forming in the blackness that swallowed the space between us. You're the one who made the choice. They hissed, voices overlapping like an unholy chorus. You owe us. The very walls of the building trembled, creaking under the weight of a power that had been unleashed. No! I shouted, as the fabric of my reality unraveled at the seams. Panic surged within me, tightening like a noose as I turned to run. But the shadows, like serpents, writhed and lashed out, ensnaring my limbs as I fought against their grasp. Help me! Echoed from the wraith-like figure, this time warped and twisted into an agony that pierced my heart. You can't escape who you saved. We are one now. Every step I took felt like wading through a bottomless pit, my resolve crumbling under the pressure of an otherworldly past festering at my feet. The edges of my vision blurred with the flickering shadows, and the nurse's shouts became indistinct as terror wrapped around my throat. The ground opened beneath me, a maw of darkness threatening to swallow me whole. In one final lurch, I turned to the nurse, but I found her frozen, eyes wide with terror, pulled toward the shadows creeping closer, whispering promises of despair and unearthed truths. As I leapt toward the exit, the ground trembled beneath us again, and my feet caught the cusp of the threshold just as a shriek tore through the night, raw and chaotic. You will return, just as I did. You owe us blood. And then I felt the ground give way completely, plummeting into an abyss that swallowed my screams, the shadows laughing as they enveloped the threshold behind me, sealing my fate in the clutches of a horror far beyond the veil of death. As darkness consumed me, I felt something seize my ankle, dragging me backwards, and the last voice I heard, wrenching me further into the void, was his, dripping with malice, "Come back to me." Dread hung in the air like a thick fog, pressing down on my chest as the abyss sprawled around me. I was caught in a relentless descent, a cruel and spiraling fall through a void where echoes of anguish enveloped me, a cacophony of tortured whispers clawing at my sanity. Shadows raced past me, coalescing into ephemeral figures that morphed and twisted, their faces just beyond comprehension. With a sudden jolt, I hit solid ground, an unyielding surface that felt cold and damp beneath my palms. I gasped for breath, the sharp air stinging my lungs as I pulled myself up, bewildered. The transition from freefall to this hellish landscape confounded me. Where was I? As I struggled to focus, the darkness that clung to the air rippled with ethereal luminescence, revealing a nightmare reflected in splintered mirrors lining the walls. Before me was a sepulchre of sorrow. Each glass shard contained moments from my life, twisted and distorted, blooming with raw emotions that I never knew could become grotesque. I saw fleeting glimpses of that familiar smile, the one I had sacrificed so much for. But now it was marred, his eyes filled with tears that bled crimson as he screamed wordless horrors, hands reaching out for me behind cracks in an unforgiving barrier. The shadows quivered, flickering at the edges of my vision, whispering my name with luring cadence. You're one of us now. You can never escape. Every step I took felt like treading on shards of glass, the memories cutting deeper into my mind. I turned to the nurse, hoping for a vestige of sanity amidst the chaos, but found only an empty space where she had been, swallowed by the very darkness that had dragged me down. Panic swelled within me, knotting my stomach as I traced the glassy reflections in search of her presence, hoping to find a way back. The reflections convulsed, twisting into images of people I once loved, faces I thought were lost forever. My own face stared back, marked by the heavy toll of despair etched across its surface. There, beside me, was the darkened figure, the tortured visage of my sacrifice, moldy with sorrow and conflict. His jaw clenched, eyes spinning in malefic void, a prison for the resurrection of something far more monstrous. Help me, his voice drifted through the grim tableau, a shattering echo that bound me in place. It was a plea full of betrayal. I was drawn toward him, not by love anymore, but by a twisting sense of responsibility and horror. I was compelled to absolve the weight of the act that had bound us. The air rippled as shadows coalesced around me, forming grotesque shapes that writhed with life. They surged toward me, fingers of darkness clawing through the shards, rushing towards my throat, demanding, pleading, screeching, "You owe us your heart." Choking back my fears, I stumbled back, frantic. I could feel their breath, bitter and cold, swirling around my chest, squeezing the very essence of my soul. These were no mere shadows, they were echoes of all those who had been consumed by the darkness. Each whisper clawed at my sanity, begging for acknowledgement, for my fear to manifest into a sacrifice of its own. I tore my gaze away from the broken mirrors, determined to escape, searching for a way through the pulsating cascade of terror. It shifted, an endless loop, always taunting me with the grin of the one I had fought to save. Each flicker of his image festered like an infected wound, feeding off my uncertainty and growing stronger with every heartbeat that thrummed like a warning drum in the hollow of my chest. "Join us," the voices hissed in unison, a chant that thrummed through the very air, vibrating my bones with a chilling resonance. I could feel them yawning, waiting for me to lose myself within their eternal abyss, and then, among those primordial screams, I felt it tug at my heart, an ice-cold grip wrapping around my soul, pulling me toward the darkest reflection of myself that I had ever known. A bond forged of blood, fear, and madness. I gazed into the mirror, the reality around me distorting into a spiral, and behind it, radiating with his silhouette, was the path I had to face. "Come back to me," he whispered once more, now devoid of the anguish from before, a voice that resonated deep within me, laying bare the darkest corners of my heart, offering me a twisted salvation. With a sudden jolt, I realized the truth. Their demands were not only of love or despair, but a sinister link that tethered me, a darkness I had already accepted. I teetered at the edge, the shadows swelling around me, and in that moment of clarity, I understood what I needed to do. But before I could act, the mirrors shattered into 1,000 shards, exploding outward and enveloping me in a storm of glass and darkness. As I spun to shield myself, I realized, with dawning horror, that each fragment did not cut, but fused, piercing my skin and enveloping my body. I was becoming part of the echoes around me. In one frantic heartbeat, I was no longer running, I was willingly embracing the abyss that hungered for my soul, and the final reflection of him consumed me whole, the darkness laughing as I surrendered. "Welcome home," his voice echoed, dripping with malice, as the last flicker of light faded from my world. But even in my acceptance, a chill swept over me as I sensed the souls around us stirring, whispers rising anew, new sacrifices, craving release, all awaiting me. And then, a sharp, unyielding pull grasped my ankle once more, dragging me deeper into the void of my own creation. But this time, the darkness wasn't just a veil waiting to be traversed, it was alive, and it was growing. I gasped, realizing even as I fell, that the hunger within me had only been awakened. "You're just beginning," he taunted, as the shadows began to shape once more, and I found myself facing a crowd of eyes, hollow and gleaming with anticipation. And just as I thought I had succumbed, something brandished forth from the depths a blinding light, stark and breathtaking, igniting my vision as it surged through the shadows. Fear gripped me, the very darkness I had embraced was now raging against this light. And as the figures around me began to dissolve under the illumination, the last words echoed in my mind, a chilling realization surging through me. Perhaps, in this unearthly gambit, there was a chance for salvation. But at what cost? And before I could question my fate any further, the chaos exploded, flipping my world upside down. At that moment, I was struck by confusion as I realized I was not alone in this realm. The echoes were rising, gathering themselves, weaving a new form from the darkness. They were becoming whole once again, but not from the remnants of their lost lives. No, they craved something much more substantial. And then, I saw them, the shadows emerging once more, but they were not the twisted forms of those lost to anguish, they were him. "Welcome back," he grinned with terrifying delight, the reality spinning beyond comprehension. And in that horrendous revelation, I knew that the darkness would never yield. It was only the beginning. The air thickened with tension, a palpable dread that suffocated even the flickering light engulfing me. Shadows writhed and moaned, their forms melding into those of an audience, their vacant eyes fixated upon me, judging and waiting. I was no longer a mere participant in this grotesque spectacle, I was the center of a ghastly performance. My own reflection twisted beside the dark figure who had given me life, now donning a mask of malice. Isn't it beautiful, this reunion? His voice dripped with sarcasm as he stepped closer, the light around us battling the encroaching darkness. You see, it wasn't just your organ I wanted. It's your essence, your very being. His grin widened, revealing a shift of power that coursed through the air like thunder. The shadows shifted with his words, swirling in a frenzy that pulsed with the rhythm of ominous drums, an ancient calling that resonated through the very fibers of the ground beneath my feet. Each beat echoed memories too deep to recall, and dread spilled into the air, potent and intoxicating. What are you? What is this place? My voice quaked, splintering against the weight of despair as I fought against the influence wrapping around me, a seduction of darkness promising release. His laughter was hollow, echoing like shattered glass. You are a part of it now. This realm feeds not just on despair, but on the very essence of those who dare to lie here, he said, gesturing to the gathering shadows, still forming their grotesque versions of the lost. You should be flattered. You are the most significant offering of all. Panic ignited within me as I sprinted past the writhing shadows, desperate to escape this grotesque congregation. My heart thundered in my chest, drawing the dark figures closer, thirsting for my pain and terror. With each frantic step, they bloomed, stretching out jagged, clawed hands as if to pluck me from the light. Then I stumbled upon an irregularity in the ground, an uneven crack that yawned wide, exuding an acrid smell, ripe with decay. Before I had time to react, it pulled towards me, an abyss I recognized all too well. The darkness would embrace me entirely, erasing every last fragment of hope as I circled the precipice. No. My cry reverberated, piercing the oppressive atmosphere, though I knew the futility of my resistance. In that moment of pure desperation, I caught my reflection once more in the shards of glass that still clung to their shape, revealing possibilities, twisted futures that should have never been. Bits of myself melding with those I had thought lost, their faces flashing before my eyes in wrath and retribution, and then, a grasp upon my shoulder, cold and unyielding, like death itself, as a shadow swept forth from the dark mass, clasping onto my flesh, anchoring me to the moment. I swung wildly, catching a glimpse of the figure, my twisted face distorted into one of agony, tears streaming down its cheeks, pure horror etched into a smile that mocked every last ounce of courage I held. Don't you see? The figure whispered, voice a bare hiss against the cacophony of dread. We are you. You are us. The bond you forged binds us together in this endless cycle of anguish. There is no escape. The shadows echoed with moaning agreement, entwining around me, their whispers growing louder, more coherent, a collective lament rising through the gap of fear. Not again. I pleaded, twisting free of the hold, but it was futile. The ground felt alive, chains of shadow stitching me into the fabric of this nightmarish realm. The light wavered, flickering like a dying candle, illuminating them all, those who were transformed into vessels of grief, trapped in eternal purgatory. That I turned back to the twisted version of myself, terror gripping at the essence of my spirit. What do you want from me? I roared, desperate for an answer, though I already feared the truth that loomed just beyond the light's tenuous grasp. With a chilling chuckle, he leaned in closer, those eyes unfathomable voids reflecting back the light, swirling with malevolent excitement. To complete the cycle, dear friend, you must join us. There's no salvation but in surrender. Accept this darkness, it calls to the deepest parts of you. A laugh caught in my throat as the last streaks of light blinked out, casting the transition into shadow. The dark masses closed in tighter, swallowing the room whole, my own face merging with myriad voices, each filled with the lament of regrets, a choir resonating with pain. Suddenly, I felt a tug, something deeper than fear, an urging that pulled me toward the depths my heart had once sought to escape. The shadows whispered promises wrapped in caress, yet intimately familiar to my soul, threatening to unearth buried memories I wished to forget. As they encroached, I stumbled, losing myself in a vortex of despair as my hands reached instinctively toward my kidney, the organ, the exchange for life, the key to this nightmare. What had I truly set into motion? Before I could reconcile the betrayal of my sacrifice, darkness surged with retribution, encasing me tighter. Visions of the faces I had seen, the ones I had sacrificed for, the ones I had pleaded for, flashed once more. But this time, they bore grim smiles, knowing I would feed the relentless hunger for despair. And then it happened, that sharp realization of the truth buried deep within us. I watched the shadows congeal into forms more familiar and terrifying than I had ever anticipated. In the deepest recesses of my mind, one by one, they turned their gaze back upon me, revealing the truth through their hollow eyes. It was always about the heart. With a sudden, paralyzing dread, I saw them transform, not into loved ones lost, but into themselves, the figures of those who had suffered before me, all, like me, bound by choice, their fates intertwined for eternity. Welcome home, dear friend, they echoed again, this time in unison, as the indomitable weight of the darkness enveloped me, and I felt fingers referencing back to grasp hold of the beating organ nested within my chest. But at that moment, a chilling howl cut through the silence, disrupting the gathering darkness, a sound unlike anything I had ever heard, one filled with rage. Out of the collimated void, something broke free, crashing through the nightmarish transformation, threatening to rend the abyss asunder. A new horror, birthed from the shadows, surged toward me. I froze, heart racing wildly as the light returned for a fleeting moment, illuminating the unrecognizable figures moving amongst the shadows, craving something buried deep within the ground of my fear. The darkness shifted as the new presence drew near, and behind it loomed hundreds of outstretched hands, begging for the fulfillment of their own craving. My heart.as realization gripped me tight, anxiety turned sour in my stomach. Perhaps there was no salvation, but only a deeper darkness awaiting me within. And then, the faces blurred, a chaos of eyes and sadness swirling before me, a new menace unfurling its hunger. The hand that grasped my heart shifted, and all the warmth that lingered in despair began to be ripped away as I felt myself slipping back, fading into the very darkness I had become a part of. But the final reverberation tore through me. Others, the ones whose fates were entwined with mine, were clawing toward their tumultuous hunger. And suddenly I understood, they would not stop until they had what they craved most, and I was right there in their sights. The light flickered once more, and in that brief moment of clarity, entwined in despair, brimming with panic, I realized it was only the beginning. Even as their haunting cries surged with triumph and fury, the darkness welcomed me home. As the light flickered and the shadows writhed, I felt the phantom touch of countless hands slide towards me, tendons of darkness weaving through the air like greedy serpents. Each caress sent icy tendrils of dread spiraling down my spine, raining in the brief flickers of hope that the light had dared ignite. They twisted and pulled, drawing away scraps of warmth from within, siphoning the scattered fragments of my essence. A cacophony of voices erupted, a symphony of grief, rage, and betrayal converging into a singular pitch that cut through the weight of despair. Resist, and you will die, they warned. Embrace, and you will truly live. I struggled within their embrace, gasping as remnants of memories flashed like lightning through my mind, moments of love, laughter, and the cruel sting of loss. Each recollection served as both a torment and a lifeline, reminding me of the world I had fought so hard to protect. But those memories seemed to fade like dust tossed in the wind, distancing themselves from the visceral dread of this place. The darkness hung heavy around me, shifting with a gleeful anticipation as I watched one figure emerge from the swirling mass, larger and more grotesque than the rest. Its face, a sickening amalgamation of familiar features twisted into malevolence, bore the visage of my donor, the man whose life I had once saved at such a steep cost. Did you think I would simply let go? His voice, velvety and dripping with malice, reverberated in my skull. You gave me life, but now, you are merely fodder for what I have become, a vessel of endless hunger. Welcome to my banishment. That I wanted to save you, I croaked, desperation clinging to my words. I didn't know what? He interrupted, his smile widening, revealing rows of teeth too sharp and too many. That you'd be plunged into a world where sacrifice is never enough? Where those who give must pay dearly, even as the darkness inside me bred a void only your heart could fill? With each revelation, the shadows surged with ecstatic whispers, the din rising like a storm, the air thickening with an urgent tension. My limbs felt heavier, as if the darkness itself sought to anchor me in its terrible embrace. In that moment, both my heartbeat and his quickened, a synchrony of impending doom. suddenly, as if responding to an unspoken command, the shadows began to peel away, revealing the grotesque forms of those I had thought lost forever. Each face twisted in torment, they drifted closer, held captive by the very essence of despair I had once battled against. The anguish reflected in their hollow eyes mirrored my own, an echo of shared suffering, a bond forged in blood and sacrifice. "Join us," they sang, their ethereal voices weaving together into a mournful hymn. "Let the cycle complete. Relinquish your soul, and we shall feast together in this wretched eternity." The scene twisted around me, the ground beneath vibrating with their haunting melody that I fought against the horror threatening to consume me, my heart pounding, both with dread and a burgeoning understanding of my own intertwined fate. I had come to save a life, and in doing so, had tethered my own to a darkness beyond comprehension. Faint memories of laughter floated like phantoms, echoes of a life once vibrant, now consumed by shadows. With rising terror, I glanced back at the main figure, the embodiment of my sacrifice, and it hit me like a tidal wave. Each heartbeat was a reminder that I had gifted him my life force, and he had transformed it into something monstrous. The insatiable void within him yearned for more, and I understood now that I was to become the final offering in his grotesque feast. No. I screamed, the sound a mere crack against the oppressive silence, drowning in the swirling shadows. "Embrace the truth," he taunted, morphing with the other phantoms, their hunger palpable. "You are the last piece, you will complete us. Feed us." With every word, a visceral wave radiated through me, the pull of the darkness both terrifying and intoxicating. As despair swelled around me, I felt the very fabric of my being ripping apart at the seams, threads of essence fraying and unraveling in the dark. I wanted to fight, but with each heartbeat, the weight grew heavier, each thud in my chest a reminder of the cost of my unknowing donation. Just as I prepared to be swallowed whole by despair, a sudden cacophony erupted. A blinding light burst forth, splitting the gathering shadows, revealing something obscure, a figure emerging from the doorway where darkness had swallowed every sense of hope. It began as a whisper but gained speed, shattering the veil, bringing with it an overpowering sense of dread laced with an inexplicable power. It was neither a savior nor a harbinger. Instead, it lingered between realms, its eyes reflecting knowledge untold as it stepped into the chaos. That heartbeat quaking and raw, the world fell silent. The anguished faces watched, caught in a collective breath, as the figure with its fractured smile gestured to me, and as I beheld the thing of nightmares, I felt a sudden, consuming dread, a deep understanding of my choice looming, because, in that instant, I realized one horrifying truth: there were worse fates than becoming part of the darkness, and I had just opened the door. With a piercing laugh that chilled the heart of time itself, the figure spread arms wide, inviting the shadows to converge once more, and I was caught in the throes of a new beginning. It wasn't just about my heart, it was about the darkness reclaiming its own. And with that, everything faded to black. I was adrift in a void, a churning storm of darkness entwining me until I could feel no distinction between my body and the encroaching shadows. Moments stretched into an eternity, displacing my sense of time as I awaited whatever horror awaited on the other side of oblivion. Shimmering fragments of memory glimmered in the murk, a half-remembered song my mother used to hum, laughter echoing through sun-drenched afternoons. But their brightness was eclipsed by the insidious whispers that slithered through my mind. "It's just the beginning," they conspired, their murmurings threading into my psyche. Suddenly, the blackness shattered with a sudden cacophony, a tearing of something unseen, and light surged back into my existence, stark and blinding. Yet, the brightness was wrong. It radiated a sickly hue, a ghastly imitation of warmth that left a bitter taste of ash in my mouth. I found myself lying in a cold, sterile room, a hospital bed, with the smell of antiseptic choking the air. Panic ignited a flurry in my chest as I bolted upright, only to be met with a chorus of machines wheezing around me like dying creatures tethered to life. Confusion clawed at the edges of my mind as I sought to understand what had transpired. Hadn't I just? My body felt foreign. Each breath was a struggle against an unseen weight that constricted my lungs. I glanced down at myself, noting the frayed remnants of gauze bandages wrapped around my abdomen. My kidney, my very essence, had vanished. But that was the least of my concerns. The real terror lay in the fact that darkness stirred at the corners of my consciousness, writhing and watching, waiting for my next move. "Welcome back," a voice crooned from the shadows, and I turned my head slowly to see who had spoken. A figure leaned against the doorway, draped in shadows that refused to unveil the identity beneath. Their face was obscured, but a familiarity lingered. It felt as if I had known them in dreams laden with dread. "Who are you?" I croaked, my throat raw and aching. The laughter that erupted was unexpected and brimming with malice. "You really don't remember, do you?" He stepped into the dim glow of an overhead light, revealing the smirking features of the man I thought I had saved, the donor of my shattered illusions. "I never was, and never will be, the man you thought I was." With a swift movement, he gestured around the room, and grotesque images flickered into view on the monitors surrounding us. Bodies tangled in torment, souls writhing in despair, faces I recognized and couldn't quite grasp. Each image, a testament to the horrors turned reality, flickered and twisted as if alive. My heart raced, pounding against my ribs, demanding answers I wasn't sure I wanted. "Every life saved carries its weight," he continued, his voice echoing as if it were coming from all directions. "But you took on a particularly heavy burden." He laughed again, and I recoiled at the sound. It echoed like a broken bell tolling in the depths of night. "Is this a nightmare?" I asked, horror creeping in. "Am I dead?" "No," he replied with a predatory grin that sent chills through the marrow of my